the Biohackers podcast. My name is Teemu Arna. I'm your host, and today's guest is Anthony DiClementi. I didn't know if I pronounced that right. Did I?
Nailed it.
Absolutely. Cool. So you are a certified personal trainer, certified nutrition specialist, and you're not just like reading about these things, you're actually experimenting on these things with yourself and with your clients. So tell me a little bit more about what got you interested in getting kind of a systemic view of the human being, and why do you want to induce change?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that necessity can be our greatest teacher. And it was getting sick myself in 2011 that really initiated this journey. I was an NCSF certified personal trainer. I'd gotten the certified, the nutrition specialist certifications, but I put very little stock in certifications these days. I think that a lot of the people who are at the leading edge are autodidacts, people that have learned through their own study by collaborating with other people, other leaders in the industry, and by working in the trenches with people that are dealing with complex health issues that have not been able to be solved through other channels. And so up until 2011, my approach was largely nutrition, exercise, mindset, the way that a lot of folks and a lot of people in this space still go about it. And it wasn't until getting sick and having optimized those three levels, or at least what I believed was having those three things optimized based on my knowledge at the time, and not getting better, that I started scratching my head and saying, maybe there's more to this equation. And it caused me to reevaluate my entire paradigm and start diving deep into functional medicine and nutritional neuroscience, and finding less common solutions to some of these complex challenges. And with that, my own health started to improve. We were able to get results for people that where the nutrition and exercise had failed them. Once you started incorporating things like stress management, sleep, the right types of supplements based on underlying health issues like gut dysfunction, HPA axis dysregulation, neurotransmitter imbalances, thyroid issues, hormonal issues. Once you start looking at the complete picture and addressing it from all necessary angles, these people started getting better too. And that was what really caused me to redefine what I think makes a healthy human being, and kind of the main sections of our book, which are nutrition, movement, stress management, sleep, supplements, hydration, oxygenation, light, mindset, and habits. And then we've got an entire troubleshooting section for the folks that have underlying health issues that may supersede some of those foundational components.
Can you remind us on what is the book that you're talking about?
It's the Biohacker's Guide to Upgraded Energy and Focus. And if we're going with the full lengthy title, it's An Uncommon System to Rapidly Optimize Physical and Mental Performance.
Cool. So what we have on the podcast right now is the two Biohackers Guides or handbook authors chatting away. So when it comes to these different techniques, you are talking about taking the whole picture, taking kind of the functional, holistic view into what goes on in a human being, and that probably you agree with me that treating a disease is oftentimes it's a complex arena where you're talking about sleep, diet, stress management, all these things, that there is no single silver bullet that will heal you in the end, or at least, I mean, you can probably get better, but you might get sick soon again because of some habits that you have. So that makes it an extremely complex arena. Is there anything specific that you focus on that you have found, like when you start with someone, that how do you like figure out where to start basically?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I make the analogy that a lot of times the protocol in our space is kind of the throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks approach with people, where a lot of clients come to me and they feel like whoever they've been working with has almost been treating them as like a walking experiment. Here, try this supplement. Here, try this supplement. Here, do this. And I like to instead take a step back and do some deep discovery that starts with the first time that we talk and asking what I believe are the right questions. And then from there, we have a very detailed symptom-based health questionnaire and assessment that looks at some of those underlying health issues and challenges that can be common, nutrient deficiencies and excesses. I look at what they're doing on a daily basis. What are their habits? What are they putting in their body? How are they sleeping? What's their sleep timing? Sources of stress, etc. And I just try to gather as much data so that rather than taking that spaghetti against the wall approach, we're going after it with a laser. For people that are willing, we do blood tests. We have specific blood tests that I found to be helpful in uncovering the root cause of some of these challenges and even identifying complex health issues and degenerative diseases years, even decades in advance. So it's a lot of deep discovery at first and a collection of multiple data points because, like you alluded to, just as there is no one silver bullet solution, there is no one single diagnostic test that tells you everything that's going on with someone. You usually need to take multiple and then start piecing together the puzzle and saying, all right, it looks like this is what's going on with this individual. And if it's a multifactorial challenge, then you have to prioritize and say which is causing them the most discomfort. If someone's got pain, chronic fatigue, they're overweight, they're depressed, well then you want to ask them which one is most important to you in solving first. And then with that information and the data that we've gathered, you start putting together a program that is going to go after that one thing first. And just like peeling layers of an onion, each time you get a challenge solved, you move on to the next layer. And that's kind of how we approach it.
So you mentioned different kind of self-assessment tools and also more direct ways of measuring things like looking at blood work and so on. And you mentioned that you have figured out some things that work and are very helpful in discovering what the bottlenecks are. So can you elaborate a little bit more, like what kind of technologies and tools exist today that didn't exist for your practice, let's say 5 years ago or a few years ago, that you are finding useful today, and why?
Yeah, well, the biggest technology that I wasn't utilizing 5 years ago is blood work, and I know that may come as a surprise, but when your entire paradigm is all you need to do is eat better and move more, the blood work is a lot less relevant. And then so by utilizing tests that are looking at thyroid function, but not just TSH, which a lot of physicians order, at least in the States. I'm not sure how it is in Finland, but
they usually do only TSH and that's it.
Yeah, so that's a good example to kind of run with. I mean, we're looking at thyroid antibodies if there's to assess whether there's a Hashimoto's component and the likelihood that individual is sensitive to grains and gluten. We're looking at T3, T4. We're looking at reverse T3 to see if there are conversion issues where maybe the person is making enough T4 but they're not converting it into the active T3. And picking, that's just one nuance of the blood test, but having that window inside to what's taking place on a cellular level can be really helpful in identifying these things. And it's not something that I was utilizing 5 years ago, but can really bring awareness and insight to elements that could otherwise go overlooked.
Do you use like some specific services to analyze those results? Or is it still that you just go through a report that has been sent through a lab?
Both. I work with both the Life Extension Foundation and Wellness FX. Those are the main two unless I'm looking for something specific. And what's great about Life Extension is, well, what I did with them is I took all of the tests that I believe to be to paint a complete picture of the human being, at least, without without exorbitant costs or making it cost prohibitive for certain people. And then I said, okay, so here are all the tests that I want for clients. If someone's willing to get the full panel, what do they need to order in order for me to have all of that data? And then Life Extension was kind enough to get that. So I'll tell clients, order these. And then once they get those tests, it's cool because we are able to go through them together, but they're also able to get on the phone with someone from Life Extension and have an explanation of what their results mean. So it's almost like a free second opinion. And Life Extension does something where every year they do their annual blood super sale around May, and you can get a lot of those tests for 40% off.
Right on. What I do personally, I just do lab tests locally, and I actually do them in Estonia because it's like 5 times cheaper than in Finland. And
nice.
Only recently it was some of the regulatory issues were lifted. So previously you needed a doctor basically to send you to a lab and interpret the results. Now it has opened up, so you can basically, there is labs popping up that do this testing for you. You get the results. You don't need a doctor. That is a huge amount of the bill of just just getting the lab test. It's just to get someone to order them for you. And now I can do it myself. And what I do is I upload the data to Wellness FX, their tools, which enables me to track the data points a little bit over time. And I find that very useful. So that's another side of this, is that when you do lab tests, it used to be like a doctor would say, your liver values seem to be a little bit elevated. Otherwise, everything seems to be normal within the range. And as you know about thyroid issues, etc., within a range doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. You have to look at different things. And looking at things like cholesterol levels, like total cholesterol is often measured. It's kind of like looking at putting the brakes on and the gas on at the same time. You don't really see the details. So going deeper into it, LDL, HDL, apolipoprotein B, inflammatory markers, all that. Similar fashion as you were describing of the thyroid issues, is that there is so much more. And why didn't we do complex analysis was cost. So at least in Finland, it was the public healthcare system, they were avoiding costs. So they only measured things that were they thought in a reductionist fashion is necessary. So how is it in the US? I would imagine costs are a completely different story also. It probably used to cost more than it does today to do these complex panels.
Especially if you're utilizing some of the services that we've discussed. It can be, there's a few things that you brought attention to. One is that no one's going to care as much about the results of your blood test as you will, right? No one's going to take the time to really dive deep. If you do have a baseline that you can compare it to, you're going to be looking at the changes over time, whereas a physician may not. They'll just be looking at the snapshot. And these are important things to track so that we can see what's changing. In the U.S., there are pros and cons. The pros of working with a physician are that you have an expert on hand. The cons are that a lot of times there are these common mistakes made where the wrong tests are ordered. People don't take, frankly, responsibility for looking at the data themselves. If their physician orders TSH and that's it, they may not even have the knowledge to say, wait, I also want these other tests done. But beyond that, the physician will look at it and say, oh, your TSH is good. But, if being within the normal range is also a lot different from being optimal. So I think that if you're going to do this stuff, knowing what you're doing, or at least working with someone that can help you order the right tests and advocate for yourself is important, because there's so many times that someone goes in to see a physician and the wrong tests are ordered, or they're just taking someone else's word for it. They don't even look at their own test. And this is something that we all need to do.
IBM is working on applying IBM Watson technology on modeling what doctor is doing in the first line of care. And I find it very fascinating. The basic idea of just like as you were saying, they might not do the right tests, or they might not be even interpreting them like with the attention and vigor as you as a patient or a client would like to, because they know and you don't. And the better they do the consultation, the better off you are. Also, the more value you get for the money that you spend on testing. Now, we can probably replace part of that by machinery. That is basically just like algorithmically looking at different proportions of things and comparing those to statistical results, and machine learning, maybe figuring out things out of there, and also combining that with intervention. So I see what is right now as the consultation or what personal trainers or nutritionists are doing. A lot of that could be not necessarily replaced, but could be augmented with machines doing part of the work, and also preparing for you as a personal trainer some of those results and deeper analysis. So that's what I find still lacking, is kind of like creating a new picture on top of the raw data. And and sometimes you just have to look at those things, and you have to know what you're looking for. And it comes with the experience. And just to be able to sort of lift out a visualization that is more than the individual numbers, that's kind of like where I see us heading.
I completely agree. And I think that it may not be in the next decade, but at some point, being able to quickly have blood drawn and know and immediately know what's going on inside of your body will be a basic human right, or at least something that is accessible in every home if we want it to be. It could be a few decades down the line, but you think about what we learn in schools in the US, and so little of it is relevant. We don't even understand what's going on in our own bodies. We don't even understand what we should be putting in our bodies to support optimal health in mind and body. And I think that we're going to get to a point where we need to seriously reevaluate our educational system, what we're teaching people, what's really important for creating healthy, happy, independent human beings, and provide tools like this that can empower people to with the knowledge necessary for behavior modification.
Absolutely. And you are actually absolutely on the money. I come from the background of looking at education, learning. That's from which I've got some international awards. And the thing is that they don't talk about these things, how you can really optimize, let's say, your neurochemistry for learning, or your diet and everything that comes into the system that makes you happy. For example, looking at gut bacteria and its role in producing serotonin, and having adequate nutrients and all that. It's not tested, it's not discussed. I hope I had figured that out while I was studying and learning things, and learning about memory hacks and how to make sure that things that I've experienced throughout the day would be encoded into long-term memory. We would save so much time just like doing the wrong stuff. Now, we could be geeking out the whole evening about blood work. I want to get into the practical advice and what you have learned. In preparation, you were talking about pain as a potential topic that we could discuss. We can go there, or we can go somewhere else, depending on where you come from now and what sort of interests you. You were talking about nutritional neurochemistry, which is, I assume, related to attention and brain fog and mitigating suboptimal cognitive function. So why are those things so important today, and why should everyone be interested in their brain health?
Well, I think that there are a few things that have a more profound impact on our quality of life and overall happiness than our executive function and the physical state of our bodies. And when we inherently realize that when we're in pain, it's our body's signal that something is off, and it can take its toll on our. It can really wear us down. You're just being in physical pain. So a lot of the time when we discuss solutions for pain, I think this is an area that a lot of people struggle with, and a lot of the information out there is just plain wrong. And consequently, there's a lot of people that continue to struggle with this issue of pain, and that's why it was something that I thought it could be good for us to address. I mean, you know me, I'm open to discuss anything. So if we want to go down any rabbit holes, or if there's other stuff that you're interested in, I'm happy to talk about that too.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, gut issues is one thing. I mean, there's different levels of pain. Absolutely. I mean, how your nervous system is communicating things. And I mean, if you've gut issues, it will shut down your brain basically, and so on. So let's start from the gut. I mean,
Sure.
And a lot of people have all kinds of weird stuff going on there, and that links directly to the brain, the gut-brain axis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So starting with the gut, and all of these things are interconnected. There's no system in the human body that exists completely independent of everything else. When digestion is off, this is one of the primary factors that can lead to pain. And there's, as you know, many things that could cause gut dysfunction. It could be as simple as someone is not chewing their food and thereby not mixing enough saliva and enzymes and initiating proper gastric signaling, all the way down to more complex issues like leaky gut because they're bombarding their body with these immunogenic and allergenic foods, which vary from person to person. There's a lot of overlap that, you know, there's many people that have certain sensitivities, but that's also very individual. And then you have things like hypochlorhydria, low stomach acid production, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, parasites, candida, and gut dysbiosis, and then the corresponding resulting autoimmune conditions, and like Crohn's colitis, IBS, and all of those are usually accompanied with some level of pains, aches, tightness, stiffness, arthritic symptoms that will not go away until the root cause, which is some level of gut dysfunction, is addressed and fixed.
Right on. So what are the interventions that you have found out to be most useful for addressing the root cause?
Mm-hmm. Well, if we're, without getting into anything that can be particularly costly, some of the easiest are fixing your nutrition. What's going in your body? I'm yet to have someone that I've worked with on a one-on-one basis that is not consuming a pretty substantial amount of foods that are at least initiating an autoimmune response or an allergic response for them. And a lot of times we think we're eating clean, but we are operating on misinformation, or it's generic information, not information that's for us. So I start off and I'll say, avoid the big five. Your grains, your dairy, your alcohol, sugar processed foods, genetically modified foods and their derivatives, right? So start by removing those. If you want more detail about a lot of the foods where we get into nightshades and specific nuts and things like that can be problematic, eggs, then there's more information in the Biohacker's Guide. But clean out your nutrition, reduce your exposure to these immunogenic and allergenic proteins. That's a good place to start. It will at least give your body more energy that can be partitioned to healing. And if leaky gut is something that's taken place, fixing that. Then chew your food. Make sure that your food is completely liquefied. Make sure that you're getting proper gastric signaling and mixing that saliva with your food so that it's less of a digestive burden for your body. Two things that can be consumed, which are helpful, are apple cider vinegar, and doing that in a drink where therapeutic dose, I usually recommend around 12 teaspoons daily. It can be mixed with the juice from organic lemon, and if the taste really bothers you, you can throw in some San Pellegrino, which some people
in one go or throughout the day.
Well, I do it in one go because I don't like apple cider vinegar and I want to get it done fast. But it can be sipped throughout the day. It's based on preference. A lot of times I'll just chug and chase, or use a straw if someone's concerned about the acidity and the enamel on their teeth. But getting four is kind of maintenance. 12 teaspoons a day is therapeutic. That can be really helpful. The acetic acid can lower the amount of pathogenic bacteria in the gut. It can also allow the proliferation of good bacteria, and it improves the absorption of nutrients from the food that we eat. And then along with that, as I know you're a fan of, is a cup of bone broth a day, which the glycine and some of the collagen in bone broth can be fantastic for healing and restoring intestinal integrity.
Glutamine as well, yeah.
The
amino acids, basically, that we are talking about. One thing about apple cider vinegar is also it reduces gluconeogenesis, so it has a blood sugar balancing effect, which is quite healthy. So I definitely would be generous with that stuff when I make a salad. So yeah, bone broth is another thing that you would recommend every day. So how do you prepare your bone broth? I mean, like, where do you get it? What do you use?
So I am admittedly lazy when it comes to the culinary arts. And there's a company in the U.S. called Arizona Grass Raised Beef. They make a good quality bone broth. They don't ship to Chicago, or they do, but it's like $150, which is more than you would spend on a gallon of bone broth. So there's a company in Chicago, a superfood juicery, and one of my friends owns that, and he'll order gallons of the bone broth for me, and I just go and pick that up. But I just recently got a pressure cooker. My friend Mike Geary, he's the guy that owns and runs like Truth About Abs and Paleo Hacks and a lot of those companies. He uses a pressure cooker and has found that he's able to make a pretty good batch of bone broth. And instead of taking, say, 20 hours or 24 hours, he can do it in a couple hours. And the pressure cooker even does a better job at extracting some of those nutrients in the marrow compared to just a stovetop pot.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, the fact that the moment when we moved from eating the whole animal, basically all the connective tissues and organ meats and bone broth and all that stuff that goes with the whole animal, when we moved to just the lean cuts, the muscles, we are getting too much methionine, and the methionine to glycine balance is something that Master John has written a pretty good article, and I'm going to put that on the show notes. So if anyone is interested in the balance and geeking out a little bit on the amino acids and why glycine might be shutting down inflammation and so important for our health, while methionine, getting too much of it is an issue. So definitely, I mean, that's a balancing act in terms of if you're a meat eater. So
That's why I like it, Timu. You know your stuff, and there's even been some interesting findings where I've had clients. There are some B vitamin injections they're sold for the purpose of increasing lipolysis or fat loss, and they contain methionine. If you have someone that is dealing with some of these pains and aches, and you give that person one of these cocktails that contains even more methionine, further throwing off that methionine to glycine balance, it worsens their pain. I've seen this in a few different cases. So yeah, you're spot on, and all this stuff is interrelated.
So if someone is not a meat eater, so more like for ethical reasons or so on, more into vegetarian diet, what would be your kind of choice or recommendation, equal to having a cup of bone broth? So what are they missing typically in that diet that they should bring in?
Yeah. So we know that bone broth has the things that you and I have discussed, those amino acids, the glutamine, the collagen, glycine, and I have not found that supplementing them in powdered form or in whatever form you like I've not found that to be an equal substitute. It's better than nothing, and we know that some of these supplements that are high in glutamine and collagen can be helpful for the gut, but I don't have a substitute for every contingency. I have nothing but respect for a vegetarian diet. I follow a mostly vegetarian, vegan style diet myself with strategic amounts of meat. But my answer to that would be supplementing with glutamine, collagen, perhaps glycine.
Right on. So let's dive deeper into the pain sector. So we have probably different types of pain. I mean, you can have some physical injury, and we can do different hacks to bounce back from injury. And then we have basically what I'm talking about is inflammation that is beneficial for healing in short term. Long term, chronic inflammatory cytokines and markers are probably not good things in your bloodstream. So tell me more about pain and what's going on there.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, because the short answer is it depends. Depends on the person. It depends on the root cause. But there are some commonly overlooked triggers for pain. We've touched on one of the main ones, which is gut dysfunction, some form of gut dysfunction. And the easiest one to address is hypochlorhydria. But when someone is not properly breaking down their food, it's likely to be accompanied by gut dysbiosis, leaky gut, and the inflammation that transpires. We've also seen thyroid issues can contribute to pain and rheumatic symptoms. Even people that are on thyroid medications like Synthroid, I've seen many instances of those people dealing with pain that does not resolve itself despite them having normal blood levels until they get their medications sorted. Neurotransmitter imbalances like low serotonin can contribute. Again, there's that interrelationship. How much of that is tied to gut dysfunction? It could be a good amount. And what else? There's a number of other things that can cause pain, but those are some of the main ones that come to mind. You've got your gut dysfunction. You've got people just putting the wrong nutrition in their body, thyroid issues, neurotransmitter imbalances.
Probably also overactive sympathetic nervous system sign.
Yeah.
So it seems. I mean, I studied a little bit about ergonomics, and people have a lot of back issues, sitting too much, etc. And sometimes just the stress from the work makes you feel pain everywhere in your body. So it's kind of like being too much in the sympathetic nervous system activation side compared to parasympathetic nervous system activation is a big deal also in modern life. Yeah,
there's also when we're chronically stressed, we know that that's linked to inflammation. We know inflammation is linked to hormonal resistance, and in the thyroid pathway and otherwise. And so much time sitting. I mean, the average American now is around 13 hours a day, I think. And when people are experiencing back pain, a lot of times they're doing things to try to fix their back. They're going to chiropractors and they're getting standing desks. But more often than not, I see a connection there between tight glutes, piriformis, QL, even the psoas. And back pain in people, and taking steps to improve not just their posture, which I know you're a big advocate of posture correction and improved biomechanics. But you improve those things, but you also need to work on the trigger points that could be the root cause of back pain, which can originate from the glutes and the abs, the psoas.
Right on, right on. So basically, it's kind of if you have pain somewhere, you look upstream, there might be a problem, or you look downstream, there might be a problem in glutes or something that actually then escalates into back pains, or you have a neck issue, like too much mobile phone, and that sort of like escalates down and so on. What I found useful in terms of like tracking is actually not these like typical activity trackers that track steps. But what I have is this little device that's tracking how much I sit or stand in proportion to being active and lying down. So I'm just like carrying this thing so that I get this picture of my day, and I definitely see the correlation right there. So too much sitting, too much lying down is not good, and also just like too much standing is also not good. So you need to like change your position throughout the day, and that pattern interests me greatly as we speak. And so you work with biomechanics also, and you do a lot of exercise. You probably correct and treat fascial problems and so on. So what have you found to be the most beneficial interventions for people who sit too much?
Yeah. The standing desk is an okay place to start. But usually when it comes to myofascial issues, fixing the nutrition at the expense of sounding like a broken record. I think nutrition is the foundation for most positive changes, at least that they're based upon. And then figuring out, letting the pain guide you to the area that needs to be addressed. And so we know that some of the more common ones are the IT band, the glutes, the psoas, and I'll look at a person, let's say it's someone that's dealing with back pain and knee pain, right? So we'll have that individual make some dietary changes, then we'll have them roll out their IT bands. We'll have them get a lacrosse ball and kind of get that get a stretching of the glutes, where let's say you take your right ankle, you put it over your left knee, then you bend your left knee so that you're stretching the right glutes. Throw that lacrosse ball underneath, and you let it get in there. And this whole time you're assessing the pain. How bad is it? And I'm looking at their face, because their face isn't going to lie. And then we also do the psoas, and I'll ask them, where does it hurt you the most? And that's usually a good place to start. The same way that when we're helping someone through complex health issues, you're trying to figure out, all right, if this person has gut issues and thyroid issues, and they're depressed and they're dealing with pain and all these different things, which one is causing them the most discomfort? That's where you start. It's a lot like that with myofascial issues. Let the body and the pain response dictate where you start.
Right on. So what are your favorite tools for working with just like tight sections, lacrosse balls or foam rollers, etc.? Like, is there any like kind of biohacking equipment that you just like can't live without personally?
I've got so many of those little tools and gadgets, and I use like 3 of them. I use the lacrosse ball all the time on the glutes. I use a little roller for the plantar part of the foot. A lot of mechanical issues can originate in the bottom of the foot, and working that out can be helpful in alleviating pain upstream, as you said, in the knees and hips and low back. I use a trigger point roller or a rumble roller, and those are the ones that I go to most often. Some clients use TENS devices, the electrostim to help with pain. I've got a Mark Pro Plus that I use occasionally. I'm a huge fan of cold thermogenesis. I think that's one of the greatest interventions for dealing with pain. but yeah, I've probably got 50 different tools for myofascial release, and I use about 3 of them consistently.
Right on. So which are cold exposure and just like a little bit of rolling with round objects.
Well, if someone was dealing with a lot of pain, they implemented consistent cold exposure. They got themselves a lacrosse ball, and they got themselves like a small trigger point roller. They'd be able to do some. They'd be able to make some pretty profound changes in their physiology. And the other thing is you got to correct the posture, right? A lot of times people aren't getting that external rotation in the hips. They're not creating friction with their between their feet and the ground. You see people squat and they've got this inward buckling of the knees, which completely disengages the glutes and hips. And fixing some of those biomechanical challenges is pretty important too.
What resources would you recommend anyone who wants to like dig deeper into these things themselves? Like, is there any books or websites, or like, I mean, how can they get deeper into fixing some of the postural problems?
So I have tremendous respect for Kelly Starrett and the research that he's put out there with Becoming the Supple Leopard, Ready to Run, and his new book, Desk Bound. He's also got his site Mobility WOD that has membership components. There we go. Nice. Yeah. Copy of Desk Bound.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. It's a good book on the desk, always. Reminds you what's inside.
I know. I'm the same way. I thrive and require those visual triggers. And just sometimes having stuff out, just seeing the book Desk Bound next to my desk would remind me to get out of my seat and move around and take a little bit of time for some self-care. So Kelly Starrett's stuff is great. I think that the challenge that a lot of people face when they start diving into that is they get into this information accumulation mode, and they'd probably do better doing some of his methods, finding what they need, and just taking time out of each day rather than gathering more information, just implementing that. Joe DeFranco's Limber 11 is pretty good too, as like a diagnostic tool to identify some of those problem areas. And again, all you need is like, if you want a more extreme version of a foam roller, you can even get PVC pipe. If you really want to get into, if you got a masochistic tendency and you really want to get into your IT bands. But yeah, that's free on YouTube. So you can just look up Joe DeFranco Limber 11, and he takes you through a lot of these movements. Find what really hurts, and spend a lot of time doing that when your muscles are warm, and do it every day until it hurts less. And
right on.
Yeah.
Right on. So fix the foundations with diet and all that. I would also add hydration in there. That might be sometimes a big issue if you just are too dried up, and then like work out some of those tight locations that are seemingly causing pain in different parts of your body. You mentioned that you have a lot of tools that you've been experimenting with. You use only a few in the end of each category, I would assume. So which ones are the ones that you have found most useful for changing behavior? Because all of us know what we should. I mean, a lot of people know about healthy diet, like supposedly what I should eat. They might be not deep as we are, but they still know some things that they are not doing. And probably we all know that we should be sitting less and probably sleeping more, and not pushing the snooze in the morning, but just get up there and exercise at every point when there is an opportunity. But we just don't do it. So what tools and techniques, methods you have found useful for inducing that behavior change that is lacking really in the end?
Yeah, I think that before even getting into the specific tools, techniques, and strategies, it all starts with why, knowing why you want to make these changes. how is the status quo keeping you from living the life that you are capable of living? So what bothers you about where you're at right now, and using that pain to leverage making these changes, and then going deeper from there and saying, all right, if I make these changes, if I implement these things, how is my life going to be different? So you're really getting clear about how you're shortchanging yourself in your current situation, and then that taps you into the pain component, and then you have the pleasure component, which is how are these things going to get better when I make these changes, right? So that's that why. Answering that why question is step one. Step two is making the decision, and decide is from the Latin word decidere, which means to cut off from. So cutting ourselves off from this option of retreat and dabbling. I think so many times we dabble, and this 1 foot in, 1 foot out mentality, it's weak and it's disempowering. And we need to say, all right, if it's worth making these changes, go all in. Become healthfully obsessed with this, at least in the short term, and until you get the results. And once you've decided, you make that commitment that you're committed to achieving the result that you want, and you won't stop until you do. So getting clear on your why, making the decision, cutting yourself off from the option of retreat, the same way that Hernan Cortez burned his ships when they came to conquer the Aztecs. It eliminated the option of retreat, and his men knew that we either need to conquer the Aztecs or we will perish. Finding ways to do that in our own life, we commit, and then it is building a daily strategy to bridge that gap from where we are to where we want to be. That's when the tools come in. And I know that wasn't specifically like answering.
It was fantastic. I mean, yeah. You would just put into pictures just the beginning foundations, like what should motivate us and how to keep us on the track. So getting to the tools,
yeah. So one that I've found very helpful recently is, and it's from your neck of the woods, is the Oura Ring. And my Achilles heel has been sleep. My father has Parkinson's. We know that lack of REM sleep is correlated with Parkinson's. We know that, there's a lot of things that are, but so sleep, especially being the thing that I consistently shortchange when I get busy, was a concern of mine. And despite teaching that to clients, putting it in the book, writing chapters about it, it was not a behavioral change that I was able to consistently implement myself. So I started asking myself, why is this? And there was some interesting research that showed what happens when we don't sleep is that we have this degradation in cognitive and physical performance, but we lack the awareness to assess it ourselves. So when they took people and they started depriving them of sleep, they would see this dramatic deterioration of their reaction time, their executive function, etc. But then when you ask the person how the lack of sleep was affecting them, they'd be like, maybe I'm a little bit tired, but other than that,
they don't realize, or they downplay the effects.
Right. They don't realize it. So we need things to bring more awareness to what's going on. And this Oura Ring has helped me a lot because it doesn't, whereas some of these activity trackers, they'll tell you how much you slept, or they'll tell you when you woke up throughout the night. This is looking at your REM sleep, your deep sleep, your light sleep, how much time you spent awake. It tells you how your sleep timing was based on when you went to bed and when you woke up, and if that's in alignment with what we've found for human beings to be an optimal circadian rhythm. So it's looking at all of these different things. And what I was finding is that my REM sleep sucked. So even if I spent a good amount of time in bed, my REM sleep was in the bottom quartile. And I was like, this isn't good for a guy that doesn't want Parkinson's or any other neurodegenerative condition, or heck, just wants to function at my best throughout the day. So I started making, from that data, I started making other interventions, and in less than a week, my REM sleep was almost all the way full.
Wow.
So this has been a pretty powerful tool to give insight that I would have otherwise had no idea was there.
That's absolutely right. I mean, sometimes we need these technologies and tools to show us the mirror that we can actually see firsthand what's going on that we might be ignorant of, or just like barely things are invisible, and then enables us to track as we do changes and with different interventions what works and what doesn't, and seems to improve the condition. And you have tracked that down to genetics and herited handicaps and hacking that aspect. To me, it's always about starting, like you said about in the beginning, is like which of the problems that you see. I mean, we see all kinds of problems in our lives, and picking up the ones that seems to do the biggest difference. And also on the emotional side, like I see the emotional side of the Parkinson's disease and all that when you're describing this, the family lineage and so on. So it's a big thing to start also on those things that are meaningful in terms of behavior change. So that's fantastic. I think we have been going on for quite some time, and we have some pretty good covered topics here. If people want to learn more about your work and dive deeper into different aspects that you're doing, or they want to get some consultation or whatnot from you, so where are you hanging out, and where are you producing your material, and where do you want to take that?
Yeah, the best place to start is biohackersguide.com, and we give away the book for free. We just want to get that information out there. I'm very vocal about the fact that generic programs tend to yield generic results, and that's if the information is correct. But there's a lot there that I think will, as in your book, open up people's eyes and help them to see the big picture and identify maybe some behavioral patterns that aren't serving them. And then if they want to go from there, we've got the Biohacking Secrets Show podcast with people like Tony Horton and Laird Hamilton and Dr. Joe Pizzorno and Michael Murray and a lot of the great luminaries in the field. We need to get you on there as well. Once you're past the summit, I'm sure you're pretty slammed until then. And yeah, we put out a lot of free information. I try to do Facebook Live videos regularly to give away a lot. And then if people want more, they can check out coaching and a biohacking week and things like that, where we can do more stuff one-on-one.
Right on. So if people want to get started, like there's all these different things that they can look at, like where would they get the most bang for the buck? What would be the best return in all the different areas that you're covering in your book?
So what we did was, now is this in terms of pain, or is this just overall energy, focus, quality of life?
I'm getting asked often, like, if I measured one thing, what should that be? Or if I did one thing in terms of my nutrition or sleep, etc. Like people want to just like have like some quick things that they can start with that for most people seems to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. The most beneficial thing that they could do is follow the 28-day protocol that I outline in the nutrition section, where we strip away all of these immunogenic and allergenic foods that we talked about. The downside of it is that it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. It's a very restrictive diet for 28 days. The plus side is that afterwards you will know a lot of the foods that are right for you and the foods that are causing you problems that you may not have even thought were related to food. And that will lower inflammation. It will decrease pain. It will elevate your mood. It will boost your energy. It will move you on the path of feeling better in all of the areas that we care most about, that have the highest correlation with quality of life.
Right on. So here you go. One of the tools to figure out, like in terms of diet, what is kind of causing reduction in performance and tension, and what's linked to your pain. So elimination diet. So that's one way to start. So thank you so much, Anthony DiClementi. This has been fascinating. We could be talking like hours out. But if people want to learn more about you, I'm going to be putting your website addresses and all that into the show notes. BiohackingSecrets.com, that was right, one of those addresses, and Biohacker's Guide. So Anthony will be speaking at the Biohacker Summit in Helsinki, 18th of November. I will be there as well. I mean, it's going to be fantastic with Ben Greenfield and all these experts who are very deep into different aspects of biohacking. You will be able to basically put yourself into ice cold water with cold thermogenesis and experiencing Finnish traditional sauna and some of the more modern techniques, archaic techniques of improving human performance. So looking forward to seeing all of you there, and you, Anthony, especially. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and
I can't wait.
Also to know you more. Very cool. So Biohacker's Handbook is also being now translated. The nutrition chapter is out already. We have the exercise chapter almost ready. It's going out. So biohackingbook.com is something you may also want to check out. But for Anthony, biohackersummit.com and Biohacking Secrets is where you want to start. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Timo. I appreciate your time. It's been fun as always.
Awesome. Keep upgraded. So over and out.